Hello, and welcome to this series of presentations from the Great CERQual group. In this session, I'll be talking about how to assess the coherence component of Great CERQual. I am Benedicte Carlsen from Western Norway University of Applied Sciences and the University of Bergen, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Great CERQual group. The Great CERQual approach consists of 4 components. In this session, you will learn about the coherence component. The learning objective for this session is as follows. To understand the role of the coherence component in the Great CERQual assessment, and to be able to apply this component to a finding from a qualitative evidence synthesis. When carrying out a CERQual assessment, we define the coherence of the review finding as how clear and cogent the fit is between the data from the primary studies and a review finding that synthesizes that data. By cogent, we mean well supported or compelling. We are less confident that the finding reflects the phenomenon of interest when the fit between the data from the primary studies and the review finding is not completely clear. In the qualitative evidence synthesis, as in primary qualitative research, one can think of findings as being located along a continuous spectrum representing the degree of transformation or interpretation of the data. At one end of the spectrum are more descriptive findings, that is, findings that describe patterns in the data. Thus, the circles on the left-hand side represent individual study findings that the review author has chosen to sum up. At the other end of the spectrum are interpretive or explanatory findings, represented here by the single circle. These transformed findings provide theoretical interpretations or explanations of the patterns in the data. Descriptive findings provide a summary of the underlying patterns of data in the studies. When these underlying patterns are complex or varied, the coherence of a descriptive review finding depends on how clearly and cogently this complexity and variation is described in the review finding. The coherence of a descriptive finding may be threatened, however, if it only describes the most dominant patterns in the data and does not sufficiently capture the presence of outliers and/or ambiguous elements in the data. By outlier, we refer to data in the underlying studies that do not fit the dominant data patterns across studies. More explanatory review findings offer interpretations or explanations of patterns in the data. Therefore, the coherence of an interpretive or explanatory finding depends on how clearly and cogently these patterns are interpreted or explained in the finding. The coherence of this kind of finding may be threatened by the presence of data in the primary studies that challenges the main interpretation or explanation in the review finding, by disconfirming cases or by plausible competing explanations. So, to sum it up, for more descriptive review findings, a coherent finding would represent well the underlying patterns that appear in the data. For more interpretive or explanatory review findings, a coherent finding would provide a strong account of the patterns in the data through convincing interpretations or explanations. So, how do review authors deal with variation or ambiguity in the data? We will look at an example drawn from a qualitative evidence synthesis of how children in institutions experience staffing arrangements. The synthesis found 7 studies that indicated that children had good relationships with staff members and preferred long shifts because of the stability this offered. However, in one of the primary studies, some children had poor relationships with one staff member and preferred short shifts. And there was also one study where the children liked the staff, but some of them appreciated the variation in staff that was associated with short shifts. If the review authors then choose to present the synthesized finding descriptively, it could look like option 1. Most children preferred staff to have week-long shifts because they liked the stability and structure and the opportunity to form attachment. Children in one study preferred short shifts, but these children had poor relationships with their caregivers. In one study, the experiences of the children was unclear. If the review authors choose to present the synthesized finding in a more interpretive manner, it could look like option 2. In situations where children have good relationships with their caregivers, they prefer longer shifts because these provide stability and structure and opportunities to form attachment. If the authors choose option 1, there is no reason to be concerned about coherence. But if the authors choose option 2, we would have minor concerns about coherence. And we would say something like, the finding is broadly supported by the data. However, one study gave a contradictory account of children's experiences, although this may be explained by their poor relationship with caregivers. In another study, children's experiences were unclear. So, the balancing that review authors have to consider is this. They may strengthen the coherence of the review finding by avoiding more transformed, interpretive or explanatory findings in favor of more descriptive findings that have fewer threats to their coherence. On the other hand, these kinds of descriptive findings may be coherent but may be of less utility since they fail to offer users of the review any explanations for the patterns described. This presentation was based on the work of the Great CERQual project group. If you would like to learn more about the Great CERQual and for further reading, you can visit our website and you can join the mailing list or you can join the project group via the web page or email below. Thank you.